my dear. And there's Linda, also welcome. Well, welcome to everyone joining us today. Those who are over 50 and everyone else who's interested to know more about the Wize generation. So this special online conversation is hosted by the Wize Move Society, the online community for everyone who is over 50 and all those who would love to join us. During our last summit, Boomer or Bloomer, What's Next in April, we experienced again that this generation is growing by the day. We're living longer, are longer, healthy and active, and are better educated than ever. This generation is definitely not on their way out. We're part of the future. So it was again a huge wake-up call that this generation will impact in many ways our society, our economy, the workplace, our healthcare system, and so much more in the years to come. With these Tuesday live conversations, we will aim to give you a glimpse of what is happening online on the Wize Move Society, to share a bit more about the challenges and the opportunities that the over 50 are facing, as well as how the members of the Wize Move Society work together to create solutions and play an active role in society and the economy. So those who join us on Zoom, we love you to contribute to the conversation. If you joined us on Facebook, please share your feedback and questions in the comments. So my name is Ingun Bol. I'm the founder of Move into the Future and the creator of the Wize Move Society. I'm here today, and that is really different, with my co-host Bernadette Dijkhuizen-Kioch and our guest, Dr. Tatiana Rowson. And you probably recognize Dr. Tatiana. She normally is my co-host, but she has a lot to share about this topic. So that's why she's our guest today. So Tatiana is a psychologist and researcher on menopause, midlife and beyond. So together we will talk about that, what is still often the pink elephant in the room, and especially in organizations, menopause. So what if we could move the conversation from risk to opportunity? So before we do that, I would like to give my co-host Bernadette the floor so she can share a bit more about her background, and she will pass on the stage to Tatiana. Bernadette, the floor is yours.
Right, thank you. I'm very happy to be here today. My name is Bernadette Keogh. I am a mindfulness trainer and a nutritional therapist and a mindful eating instructor. And I also facilitate corporate training. And this is a subject that's very close to my heart because I do work with a lot of nutrition clients who are going through the transition to menopause, and they're experiencing a lot of symptoms. There's not a lot of information or not a lot of help that they feel that's out there to help them with what they're going through. So yeah, for me, it's a very, very important topic. I'm 48 myself, so I'm at the start of this transition myself as well. And yeah, so for me, I have a real kind of desire to help empower women through this change, help with any symptoms or challenges they're facing, but also start a conversation about it, because it's not something that's talked about a lot, and that's why women often feel quite alone through this transition. So it's really important, I think, today, this conversation that we're having, and very, very excited to have Tatiana here as the guest, knowing all the great research and work that she is doing in this area and allowing us to get that information out there to help as many women as possible. And so over to you, Tatiana.
Thank you. Thank you, Ingun, Bernadette. It's nice to be on the guest seat and talk a bit more about my research. So thank you for giving me this opportunity. So I am, as Ingun say, a researcher very much interested in midlife transitions. I think if we do it well, that stage of life, the rest of our lives should be unfolding okay. It's a tricky time. It's a time that we all experience a lot of change, and menopause is one of those big changes, which hasn't been talked so much about in the past, And in the recent years, there's been a surge of interest and information on the menopause. For me as a researcher, I think the importance of menopause is way beyond just menopause in its own right. Menopause is a good proxy to understand a number of issues that happen as we age, an issue of life stage, of challenges of midlife, pressures at work and family, health transitions, ageism, gender issues at work, you name it. So it's one of these topics that allow us to unpick a number of different things that seems to come together in a stage of life. So it's a very rich area, but it's an area that we're just now starting to scratch the surface and understand what happens to women and what happens to women at work over the course of the menopause transition.
Thank you, Tatiana, for this introduction. And before we move on, I want to welcome Mary Jane Roy, Linda Simmons, and Diane Gerard in this session as well. So please, ladies, after the first questions, do dive in the conversation because we want to keep it lively. And Tatiana, before we go into the real research and what you have seen there is, well, in the announcement, I used the word pink elephant in the room. And I still believe it is that, this thing that we, you know, whether we don't want to talk about it as women, you know, today we're here as this group of women, but there is, I think still, and especially in organizations, there is this thing, you just don't talk about it.
It's true. And I'm glad you touched on that straight away, because I think that's one of these big issues. One of the things that we see over the course of our lives, and we're all women on the call here, but I'm sure men that have got their wives or sisters and so on would understand that, is that we are brought up not to talk about our female body issues. We have our monthly cycles, and we are all trained to hide that, to conceal that, if we've experienced a bit of anxiety, or if you're having a bit of a harder time to cope with menstrual flooding at work or things like that, because it's not part of polite conversation. It's not part of the professional conversation. So we are trained to do that. When we get to the point of menopause, the issue that a lot of women start experiencing is still not part of polite conversation. Still there's that taboo around talking about these things. They are so biological and not quite in keeping with the professional image we want to portray at work. But we can't stop it. When the hot flush comes and goes up, we cannot necessarily stop it. It comes regardless. So that creates even more anxiety, because all of a sudden we are talking about something that we're never encouraged to talk about, that we know that to bring that to a conversation, make others uncomfortable, make we uncomfortable, and at the same time is inevitable because it's visible. Everyone can see what's going on. So it's a really difficult scenario that women are placed at work at that life stage. And of course, in the past, the number of women in their 50s, and I would say 50s because the average age in Europe is around 50. That, of course, can be younger or older, that varies. But the number of women over 50 at work was very small. Most women would leave workforce once they got married, and the ones that stayed would slowly disappear from the workforce. That phenomenon of women in their 50s, in their prime or at work, it's fairly new. It's something about the past 20 years. So suddenly that issue of being visible as a woman that got a changing body at work, it's new. and we don't know how to manage that socially and professionally.
Mhm. Yeah, I do believe that. And, you know, being in my beginning 60s, you know, it's already behind me, but I know it's a struggle for many, many women. Tatiana, and you already gave some of the, you know, the things that are happening at the workplace, at home, you know, all the results coming out of why this research. You are a real researcher, you know, that for you is. So why do we know all these things? So why do we need to do that research on this topic?
We do, England, because at the moment there's a number of us that are saying that the workplace is not working out, is not helping, but we're not quite sure why and what's the reason. So conducting research is a big part of understanding what can be changed and what we have to accept. And a lot can be changed, and certain things we have to accept, which is fine. So if you look into the women that are really struggling, the figure said is estimated at about 25% of women suffer from very severe symptoms. It's a number of women that suffer from mild symptoms that is very difficult to estimate, because we find difficult to attribute those mild symptoms to other things. Is stress, is life, is our teenage children or our aging parents or whatever. So sometimes it's difficult to associate and find the real cause. But 25% is a very big number of women that are finding very hard. And these days, the conversation about hormonal replacement therapy, and I'm not a doctor, so I'm going to talk about that as a social science researcher. It's important because we're just now understanding that the risks associated with it was a bit of bad press. So women can take hormonal replacement therapy. Not all of us, some of us quite safely, and that's fine. But not all of us also, there's that section of women we have to think about. So it's not a miracle that will fix things for everyone. And it's not necessarily a miracle that will bring us back to when we were in our 20s or 30s, because we are changing. So regardless of what we use in terms of treatment to feel better, there's an inevitability of the aging body, of stage of life that we cannot take away. So understanding the nuance of experience allow us to have better environments and better acceptance of what we're going through.
Mm-hmm. I think you're right. Yes. I would like to invite Bernadette to dive into the discussion. You was an expert, and you know you work a lot with this group. So please share your thoughts and your questions for Tatiana.
Yes, well, I'm very interested, and also the other people on the call as well, like really interested in terms of the research. How will you be getting these results out there, and really how can we, you know, as you know, people who are interested in this area, communicate with companies to get the conversation in there and to really start to make some progress, to start to highlight some of the issues, but also what can be done in a positive way to help women who are experiencing this transition. So I'm sure you've got lots of ways that you're going to be getting this research out, but interested to hear what plans you have for getting it out there.
Thank you, Bernadette. I like two things about your question. One is how to get that information, the research out, and the other is the positive, because I like the positives, an important part of here. And I'm going to explain why. The important thing with research is that academics love to write for academia, which is brilliant. We write papers, we get published, but that becomes available to a very select number of people. So initiatives like that, having this conversation now, talking to the members of Wize Move and other groups, is a way to get the information out there, because now that we're sharing in this group, and whoever's listening can just take that forward. And this way is a way that we disseminate. Now I'm going to pick on the positive that you mentioned, because I think that takes me to something that I really feel strongly about saying, which we're not talking enough. And that again, not only applies to menopause. Menopause is a good example, but if we think beyond that, we can see that applying to other issues as well. Here in the UK, in the press, there has been a massive growth in interest on menopause. You open newspapers, every other week there's an article talking about the experience of menopause. At a face value, it's great. The more you know, the more informed we are, the better life will become. So that's sort of a cycle. And I would say yes and no, because to some extent, what we read in the media shape what we think and reflects what we think. And when we open the papers, 90% of the meaningful words of these articles are about risk, disease, and discomfort. So every time we see the word menopause, we are reminded of hot flushes, risk, death, aging, and so on. This was a wake-up call for me when I started researching the media. What's the media talking about? Is the media talking about something we want to hear, or is the media making it worse? When we see that negativity around, we're starting to suffer from an absence of role models, of positive stories of menopause, of people that say, okay, I went through it. Yes, it was hard, but I liberated myself of this, of that. And now I feel more complete. And now I'm maturing, and now I'm achieving this and achieving that. So we have an absence of good stories that accompany the idea of menopause. And the issue we have with that, whenever an idea is really negative, the people that receive that label, they receive a stigma, because what they receive is an attribute that we don't want. We don't want risk. We don't want to be all this victim that needs all that this adjustment and this and that. We want to be normal and be valued for who we are. And the issue we have as a consequence of that is that a lot of women will not look for help because they don't want to be remembered as that sick person. So it's really interesting how the negativity around the theme of menopause, even though it is true that 25% of women suffers tremendously, is the same thing or the same factor that may prevent women coming forward because they just don't want to be remembered that way. And those labels stick. Those labels stick. We know by research on mental health, once you put it out there and say, you might be okay in 2-3 years, your hormone levels might be fine, but as soon as you had a bad day, people say, look at her. She's very nervous. It's menopause. So it's a really tricky thing emotionally and psychologically and at identity level to look for help when the idea of it is being portrayed as so negative.
Absolutely. So how can we get that message out there? It sounds to me that there's kind of a 2 or even 3-pronged approach where what we need to do is really educate women, to empower them to recognize the signals of that menopause transition stage, and to help them with things that can help them during that transition, whether it's nutrition, herbs, HRT, where they can go for help. And then there's also the organizational level, getting those conversations started, educating managers so that they can support their women. And especially if you think about it, the women going through the transition are also going to be quite senior in their careers. And some research I've found, and you can verify or correct me, 1 in 4 women consider leaving their job during perimenopause, the menopause transition, and 1 in 10 actually leave their jobs because of menopause. So to me, that highlights a very important place where we need to step in and really support these women so that they don't feel they have to leave because of the symptoms or the stage that they're going through. So we've got some interesting things just coming, holding that thought there. We've got a couple of things coming through on chat. So Diane shared, she was agreeing in terms of around the symptoms, that there's many symptoms of the menopause, so informing women around those symptoms, and also in terms of getting into organizations, lots of HR and management training, suggestions around clinics and lunchtime sessions for the staff. I think that they're great ideas for really getting in there and starting to change cultures within organizations. Linda shared, hi Tatiana, this is such an important topic. In my recent research on burnout in women executives and senior leaders, it emerged that in just under 50% of cases, there was a comorbidity from menopause, and raises the question of how menopause may accelerate burnout. Very interesting point there. And Diane shares again, yeah, agreeing with you, lots of the negative press, absence of good stories, bias and stigma. Many women also feel it won't affect me and seem to be older whatever age they may be. Others, especially men, will see mood swings and behaviors are caused by menopause and see it as negative. CIPD, UK Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development, have great support for HR corporates, so that's a good resource. So I'll repeat that, CIPD UK Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development. So that's somewhere where we might be able to look for some extra support. So again, just opening it up now, both to Tatiana and the other members that we have here. How can we, one, support the women, and how can we support organizations to be able to support the women through the transition? Any thoughts?
Well, I'm going to jump on that, Bernadette, because I think before we ask for how, it's important to understand why. Why do we need support? So one of the big issues at work, and feminist research has been there for a long time pointing it out, is the idea of the ideal worker. So workers are believed to be units, persons, or that have no emotion, no needs, no fluctuation of health, no personal issues or family members, definitely no teenage children at home. So the ideal worker is there, completely focused at work at all times. It's interesting that any of our listeners might think that's really bizarre. No, we don't believe that. We do. We carry with us this standard of being professional that's really strict. It tends to favor men because it reflects a bit more about the male model of work, but not necessarily, because it's not only women that has our ebbs and flows as we age. Men do experience as well in different ways, in different parts of the body, but aging process is there, and we do feel our variations. But what it happens is, for a woman going through menopause, especially in senior position, and I know Linda, and I know Linda's research, so thank you for coming here today, is that at the same time you're trying to be this sensational, amazing, ideal worker, you know that there's a lot of things going on. You know that you might be experiencing symptoms. You know that you don't want anyone to know, because there's something about your image, there's something about your position that you don't want to show that. And I'm going to add something that for me is a hypothesis, but I'll put it out there because I think it's a nice hypothesis to share, is the fact that women usually rely on hard work and competence at work to progress, much more than men. And whenever symptoms prevent women from delivering the work to a standard that they expect they should be doing, that is mortifying. It's mortifying to experience that. So as with everything, this is like stress. It's not the stress that's the problem. The stress is, it is a problem, but what we think about stress magnifies that problem into something that is overwhelming or something that we can manage. So if we are in a workplace that is too formal, that standard of professionalism is too strict, that we are not allowed to be ourselves, good days and bad days, then that environment in its own right is really threatening for women that might be going through this transition. We know from the conversation we have with Ashton a couple of weeks back that women suffer much more ageism than men at work. And menopause is a big symbol we're aging because it's inevitable, it's a biological process. It's that showing we reach the end of our reproductive life. So suddenly we're communicating that we're getting older, which is not something that goes down well, and especially with women. We're having symptoms we're dealing with, and we are still in a world that values that image of the ideal worker. So it's very difficult not to be stressed on top of anything else. So that stress is inevitable. And I think that is at the heart of the solution. The solution is not, like they say in feminist research, it's not fixing the women, but the solution is to fixing organizations to be places where people are allowed to have good days and bad days.
Yeah, thank you, Tatiana. And would anyone else like to step in to share? I know there's some in the chat as well, but anybody else like to share?
Well, Linda, maybe what you've seen in your research, that sounds very interesting.
And then Mary Jane, I saw Mary Jane unmuted as well. So do you want to go first, Linda, as Ingun has pointed to you, and then we'll go to Mary Jane. Did you want to say anything, Linda?
Only really that I think it's really complicated. I think it is to do with the age profile of senior leaders, and I think that there's a key impact here that those, and having been through it myself, both burnout and menopause, I think one did affect the other quite substantially. And I think that depending on the sector that you work in, I worked in banking, and you really don't want to be seen to be vulnerable. You really don't want to be seen to be unable to operate at the same as anybody else, whatever their gender. And you don't want special privileges to be granted to you. You want to be the same. And I think, I worked in estates, in facilities, and even simple things like regulating room temperatures, they're all set to a common standard. Now, I work in sustainability, so, my view is I want it to be as low as possible anyway, but there is a common standard, and it doesn't take into account whether you are menopausal, whether you need particular requirements, and your comfort should really be a human right. And it's not considered that way in a standard estates facilities program.
Thank you. Thanks, Linda. And that's so interesting. And
okay.
I was just going to say, it's so interesting. Again, that needs to be part of the information that's being shared with organisations. How? Because the key thing is understanding what the needs are, and that's one of the needs. So how can we communicate that into the organisation? Ingun, sorry, were you going to say something there?
Yes, please. Well, I just wanted to share my own story, and I do believe that is important. For me, I had a burnout, well, my third burnout at 42. And that was also the moment that I immediately went into menopause. So it was 42. I did not have a lot of things happening, you know, that I felt like the hot flushes and all these things that people talk about. That not. But what happened for me was much more that whole that realization about, you know, what am I doing here? I was working in the IT. I had a great job, you know, I was there, you know, on my way up. But it also, that moment made me realize, what am I doing here? You know, it is tough to be in a system that is not friendly to who, or welcoming to who I am, and I want to get out. That was, you know, one of the things that really happened to me, and it took me, you know, a couple of months to really, you know, to heal. And at the same time, for me, that was a huge decision to say, okay, this is it for me. This is not my environment. There are, you know, that I have to change. And that is, I think, also something that does happen with you in that, you know, that transition phase. It is not only physiological, that word. And it also happens, there's so much happening inside of you, and with your mindset, and becoming very aware of who you are and what you want out of life. So and there was this discussion today also, I think, Mary Jane, you were in that discussion also in LinkedIn today, that we have this quota, more women in the boardroom, more women in, you know, we want all those women to be there. But there's a lot of women who feel, you know, you can start that struggle, that fight, that to really change these organizations, or women step out and really decide, okay, this is not my system. So maybe you recognize that as well. Tatiana, Linda, Mary Jane.
Not from personal experience, but Tatiana, you raised the point, and that I thought to myself, how do we achieve that? In the fact of that there are going to be some good days and bad days. So you know, how do you sell that to an organization? And, you know, what does it look like for them to understand that this person is not going to be at the same level, let's say, quality professionalism, day in, day out. You know, it's a much bigger cultural issue, I think, because again, of the reasons you stated. So I'm questioning, how do you sell a corporate on the fact that they need to take this into account, you know? And then I've got also, if we have time later, but I've got some just practical questions as well. But how do we make this happen?
I think that's a great question. It's a great challenge, because I'm all for a challenge. But I think that the first step is challenging this idea that we are the ideal workers. We, all of us, whether we're in our 20s, we're men, women, you name it, we have to challenge that idea. I think during the pandemic, when we look at the movements in terms of hybrid work, or people rethinking their lives, whether it's worth it, carry on a particular path and making dramatic changes, is exactly down to the same issue. And we look usually, I know some of us is involved with HR and in training. We look how organizations sometimes want people to have that pattern of performance, that's peak performance on a continuous basis. And that's just not possible. That reflects something that is not quite, not only achievable, but sustainable. So when we look at the situation of a burnout is exactly being that peak performance on a continuous basis without time to rest and recuperate. So once we shift the workplace into an environment that individuals are allowed to have fluctuations of performance, because in the end, the output will be good quality anyway, it means we allow ourselves to be human. So we allow ourselves the autonomy of managing our own energy levels and our own body and our own concerns outside work and so on. And I think it takes a little bit more trust and faith on employees to allow them to do that. But I can't see, I see that's an inevitable. I think that that's the way workers are starting to push to happen, is that acceptance. And then what we have is a situation that we're not only accepting women during the menopause because they're menopause and making a little group, like Linda said, but we're accepting that everyone will have good days and bad days. And if everyone does it, it's okay. Becomes part of the status quo. So I think this is a real important shift of mindset, especially if we are here for a long run, working up to our 70s, which a lot of us, and the next generation definitely is working up to their 70s. So if you are here for the long run, that's the way work should be structured. And then instead of having women victimized or singled out or stigmatized as, look at them, they are menopause, or I'm really caring and I'm caring about them, is actually, they're just having a bad day or a good day. It's fine. They're still professionals. They're just like everybody else, and so on. So the mindset of taking away the stigma is by making it acceptable for everyone to manage themselves at work.
And just to add to that, I think, as you touched upon COVID as well, I think that we've kind of had a quantum leap in the last 2 years around this flexibility and this autonomy, because companies have had to trust their workers to work from home, and there's brought this level of flexibility already. So again, it seems like we're in a really good position now to continue with this change and kind of promoting this autonomy and flexibility, and like you say, for everybody. And just one point on the stigma as well. A client shared with me that she was having a hot flush in a meeting, and she was in the meeting with a young colleague. Actually, I think it might have been someone from an external company, and she was having the hot flush, and she just realized, I just have to say something. I'm not going to be able to go through this meeting. So she said to the gentleman in the room with her, the young gentleman, I'm having a hot flush. Would you mind opening the door for me? And he was very kind. He jumped up, he opened the door. So being like, having that confidence to be able to share what you're going through and not assuming you're going to be judged, because she was amazed how he was just so caring. Would you like a glass of water? So really not assuming that everybody feels that stigma, because actually a lot of it will be in our heads as well. So of course there is an element of stigma, but not assuming that you're going to have a negative response when you do share your experience, I think could also be a good step forward there.
Yeah. One of the things I also would like to see if we can, there was, Diana mentioned something, and that is also something that is really very happening right now, is that we are short of a lot of professional workers, you know, at all levels of the economy, in all kinds of different industry. We're short of professional people. So the organizations are more and more becoming aware that the workers are very important for their organization. So they will have to make changes. If you see, and that is, you know, also the issue or the challenges for the Wize Move Society, still, for instance, here in the Netherlands, the 55 plus generation is still a group that is really hard for them. It's hard to find a new job if they want a job, you know, if they want to get back to work, it's tough. And but it is so important for now for organizations to retain and to attract people into their organizations, that they will have to design a program, or to that they really are going to create an organization, to create an environment that is so much more welcoming to the older workers for one, but also the women. Do you see the effect of this situation that we right now have at the workspace in the economy?
I think definitely employers will become aware that, as I said, women at this age group especially was the fastest growing group of workers in the workplace. Actually, when we look at employment rates, it's largely not because a lot of young people got into the workforce, was because women are starting to take on these roles at that life stage. So it's really, really important. Linda, you posted something on the chat, and not everyone on the live stream will see, but I agree with you. I think it's changing the mindset of the ideal worker, changing organizational design of work, and having support available as medical support, if that's what women need, occupational health support at work, if that's what they need, and autonomy. Autonomy is one of those key things. He has an autonomy even to choose, if you are someone that wears a uniform to work, to wear a uniform that's a bit more in keeping with the changes of your body, because that is an important aspect. Recently in the news, we saw a couple of organizations here in the UK that relaxed the rules of uniforms. And so women at this stage could feel more included. And again, that's part of giving more autonomy to people and understand we not all have a standard body, standard needs, and standard everything else. What I wanted to say that I think is important is, if you look back, was not that long ago that women were not allowed at work to wear trousers, that they were required to wear skirts every time. So it's interesting. We came a long way. We just need to stretch out a bit more to get a bit more of the kind of setting that is appropriate for our needs and for the needs that the society required of us too as well. So that can become a bit more a fairer playing field, rather than just an environment that we're being allowed to be given that special privilege, which is quite a different tone.
It's about getting the conversation started, having those courageous conversations. But then it's, I think, a lot up to, I mean, HR has a role to play in this for sure, but it's certainly, I think, a lot has to rest on our own personal shoulders to seek out what we need in that environment, as difficult, as challenging as that might be. It's something that I think we have to start breaking these taboos around this topic.
It's true. We have to let go of any shame of talking about that. Shame is a dreadful blocker of conversation. How I'm going to talk about my hot flush with my manager that's in his 30s and is a him. Wow, just start by saying it's nothing to be ashamed of. This is a normal stage of life, but this is what's going through with me. I really need some control of the AC of the work environment. Thank you very much. How can we negotiate that? And that's fine. That's fine. That's in a way is about being a grown-up, about something that's totally natural, that we just need to come into some reasonable adjustments and just carry on.
I'm just thinking of, you know, I was posting this this conversation in one of our WhatsApp groups, and one of the men in that group mentioned, and he is regularly in these joining these conversations, and he said, I'm going to let this one pass by, it's not my piece of cake or something like that. It's, you know, that is where it starts, you know. We would have loved him to join this conversation, because then we are, you know, now we're preaching to the choir. And that is something you just, well, of course we want to do, and we want to share what we're going through and what we think organizations should be doing. But who we really should be talking to is the guys there and the younger ones, you know, who do understand. And as long as they feel like, oh gosh, this is not something I want to talk about, then you don't get that conversation going. So it's too bad he's not here. Linda.
I find that when you have dialogue with colleagues, and I've done this a couple of times in the last month, I guess, and some is sort of early 40s, male colleagues I'm talking about, and some a little bit older. When you start having that conversation with them, they actually come back to you and ask for more information. And I've had that on a couple of occasions, and I think it's putting yourself out there as someone who's prepared to have the conversation, and then you attract interest. And I think that's we all have to go out there as ambassadors, really, to say, I'll talk about it. I'll talk about menopause. It's not an issue. What do you want to know? And I've had a couple come back to me and say, Linda, I've got my mum or my auntie or my sister, you know, what do I say to them? Is there any information you can share with me? Where do I go to get information? And I think you've just got to be prepared to start the dialogue.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's interesting, we talked about shame, and there's a quote from Brené Brown: shame flourishes in secrecy. So if we can just start to use the word menopause, and like you say, Linda, that example, I mean, it's a torch. If we can mention it, then it sparks interest, and then that information's passed on further. We start the conversation. So I think it is just having that faith, and whether it's just finding someone else going through the menopause that you know, that you can start to have those conversations and gradually build the confidence to talk about it without the shame, without the secrecy. I think that's key. So a very good example there, lighting the lights of menopause discussion, and helping as many people as we can in doing so, just by using the word in the workplace, for example.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. We're back to where we started, the pink elephant in the room. Let's talk about that pink elephant in the room.
I think definitely it's something that we have to talk about, and we have to share the goods as well, the positives, the good stories, and not only show when the things are acute and negative, but actually just show it's a big chunk of us in the workplace that 51% of the workforce are women, and all these women who at some stage experience the transition to menopause. So it's important to talk about as something completely natural, because it's part of our biological imperative. It's just going to happen, and once we accept that and don't try to cover up, then conversations can be natural as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I was in a corporate earlier this afternoon, and they talked about all the diversity programs and the employee assistance programs that they have. At least whether they talked about them all, I don't know. But menopause didn't come into the conversation. And so Bernadette, people like yourself who are specialists in this, there should be some access within an organization to be referred to. If I were to come as an employee and in this transition phase, it's behind me now, but in that transition phase, I should have resources, because I know that from friends of mine who are 10, 15 years younger than I am, and of course have started in that process, and some now are completed as well. But it was a real struggle to find something that worked for them. You know, and I think one of the worst effects of menopause that really debilitates is the lack of sleep, you know, or the loss of sleep, not lack of, but loss of sleep, and loss of quality of sleep, and which I think would make you more vulnerable, Linda, to burnout as well. You know, you just, without adequate amount of sleep, you're not going to be functioning well, and you're not going to be able to be resilient throughout the day. So, and the irritation or frustration, the emotional self-control. So there has to be some central resource that people can go to. And I just want to throw it out here, and I cold water bathing. Have you heard of this, Tatiana or Bernadette? For
ice baths,
ice baths
and cold
yeah.
showers. Yes.
Yeah. Have you heard of that to help reduce the effects of going through menopause?
I
Is there any
haven't heard
research
that
on
as,
it?
okay. No, I heard that in terms of other things, immune system.
Yes,
it's good for your immune system, you know, in general. So
yeah, I just heard it anecdotally, but I thought curious to know. But it's there are so many of these kinds of treatments out there, and you have no idea, are they really validated or not, you know?
And that is so important to share these stories, you know, because, you know, if you ask the experts then, or the experts, the healthcare, they will give you the normal stuff.
The textbook stuff.
Yes, but you're actually looking for that one tip, that one advice that will work for you. And we're all individuals. So it's not like there's not, you know, one thing fits all, but it's one size fits all. It is something that works for each individual. Yeah. I would like to, because I'm watching the time, just to do a quick round for everyone to do, you know, or mention something that you feel like this is really something we also have to think of, or something that you got out of this conversation. Bernadette, do you want to start?
Yes. So what I'm taking away, especially because of the life stage that I'm at, is really just being more open with the conversation, using the word menopause or menopause transition, and not being ashamed and not hiding. So breaking this veil of secrecy around it and trying to take the conversation. That's the little torch I'm taking forward from today.
Fantastic. Mary Jane?
Yeah, I would have to say the same as Bernadette. I think it's a really important topic that and tool that we can use is our voice, you know, make it heard on these things and talk about it. Yeah.
Yeah. Linda?
I think for me, I'm really quite pleased to hear that burnout has become prevalent with others with going through the menopause. It's interesting to hear a couple of you say it, and I think when I'm supporting people that are going through burnout, I will be cognizant of whether they might be going through the menopause as well, and thinking about that and creating that sort of environment for that discussion to materialize.
And, you know, I just want to comment to you, Tatiana, you know, just want to add this. For me, that time in my life was a gift. I am very grateful that this burnout happened and that I went through menopause. It was such an amazing transition into the next phase of my life that I do not look back at menopause as something that is negative, no, what you said, risk, disease, discomfort, you know, for me, that's it. It was transition into the next phase of my life. And I never regret and never look back to what it was before. So it, you know, even, you know, if 25% is suffering, going through all these horrible things, there still is 75% of all of us who can share their stories of, you know, that it was okay and that we can work through this stage in our life, and that we can also support those who are in this other situation, the 25%. Yeah, Tatiana.
I'm glad you said that, Ingun, because there are a number of good stories of women that really make substantial changes at this stage of life, not only when they realized they were living by someone else's standards, or they were not doing what they wanted, or they were trapped in trying something that didn't work for them anymore. And sometimes the burnout, just to keep a bit on the topic of the burnout, is just a sign that something was not in alignment anyway. And that comes as an opportunity. So that's the theme of today. I wanted to bring that conversation from risk and something really negative to an opportunity to look into the world in a different way. And again, sometimes takes us not to be ashamed, take us to be open and honest with ourselves and with other people around us, and well informed of what is going on with our bodies. And for anyone that would like more information on menopause and the sort of the medical side and emotional side, in the European Menopause and Andropause Society website, there are a lot of information. So I'm going to repeat, it's European Menopause and Andropause Society. There's a lot of information, it's all verified and open to the public. So I recommend checking it out if you feel you need to know a little bit more about it. I'm going to add one more thing, and I know we're really short of time. And if you find it hard to talk about it, here's a tip: practice with a friend. If you want to talk to your manager, but you haven't had the courage yet, just get a nice, good friend and say, let me practice what I'm going to say to see if it's coming out right. And then I can go and actually do it. So don't keep it in your head. Put it out there and start getting some action.
Yeah, I love that. Yes, yeah. And, you know, and I'm going to just finish off also referring to what the Wize Move Society is doing. On one hand, I would like to suggest, you know, for our members, our female members to come together to talk about this. But I really would like to challenge our male members to join us and really get to know what is going on. And that is one. So that is for the members. But we also do, we also have Wize Moves at the workplace, so that we support organizations to go through a transition and to focus more on topics like this, and to really see this group. And I love that quote, you know, to move it from risk into opportunity, because that is really what we need. You want these women in your organization. You want them with or without their hot flashes. So make sure that we retain them and that we have all our policies in line to also attract them into that organization. So I want to leave it at that. So thank you very much, Tatiana, to be our guest this week. That was really great. You know, you do so much great research and we absolutely want to know more about it. So we'll ask you again. Thank you, Bernadette, for co-hosting this session with me. That was really great. Thank you, Linda Simmons, for joining us. And thank you, Mary Jane Roy, for being here. And well, we'll see you all soon. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Thank you.